Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you guys are doing well. I can't believe that another month has flown by and that we are already at the Swiss watch export results for the month of February. Interesting results, to say the least. It looks positive, but I think there are a little bit more hidden messages in the results from this last month, and so I thought I would go over some of those. What I do in these videos, if you are new to this series, we've done this for a couple of years now. We basically go over the Swiss watch export results for the month prior, and then go over them for the last month that they released them for, and then give you my predictions for the next month. So I'm excited to share these with you. It looks good, but I think there's some hidden messages underneath. There are a lot of discussions on Clubhouse in the watch communities there about these results, and so I thought I would give you guys my 2 cents on them. But before we do that, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to be part of the Life from This family. And if you wouldn't mind smashing that like button for us, so these videos can get into the YouTube algorithm, and so more watch enthusiasts can see the things that we're talking about and be a part of the Life from This family. That's exactly what would help us out. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be greatly appreciated. So looking back, I'm covering the results from February 2021. Looking back on the January results, January kicked off on a fairly negative result, negative 11%. This was mostly driven by the negative base, where you know, January 2020 was kind of when COVID was sort of starting, and so Swiss watch exports were not super great there. Across the board, we kind of had negative results both in materials, in price categories, and then your 12-month moving average moved just south of, I think, 24%. China led the way again at about positive 60%. I think the results are really showing that Swiss watches are hugely at risk, or not at risk, but a big part of their portfolio of countries that buy these watches are based in Asia. And so if that doesn't continue to drive the numbers forward, there could be some bad news for them. But so up 60% year over year for China was really great. When I was looking at February results, I took into consideration the fact that there would be a negative base effect, especially with China when they actually went into lockdown last year. And I said that that would probably have an impact on the results for this year as well. So I predicted about a negative 9% result, because I thought that China would have really great results, which would probably propel the Swiss watch export figure a little bit closer to that 0 mark. But I didn't think it was going to be super close to that 0 mark, and I was wrong. They definitely the Swiss watch exports, I can kind of just go over the summary really quickly. Swiss watch exports changed by negative 0.3, so really they were unchanged year over year. The wristwatches were actually up by 0.2%, and then other products were down by about 9%. This was obviously driven by the negative base effect for a lot of these countries, and we'll kind of get into that when we look at some of the specific kind of top markets. So Swiss watch exports mounted up to 1.6 billion Swiss francs, which is honestly, there have been better months, and so. Again, I think that also shows when you compare it to some of the other months' results, you know, that kind of shows that true negative base effect happening. I mean, January was 1.6 billion. So, you know, it's really unchanged month over month. Moving on to the 12-month moving average. 12-month moving average moved positive a little bit closer to that moved closer to that negative 22 or 23% mark. This again was because of that negative base effect that really propelled these numbers forward. And just to kind of explain it a little bit more, if you think about 1 year ago, Swiss watch exports were rocked because China went into lockdown, and watches really not purchased for that market. And so they had really negative results. But now their economy is doing extremely well right now. They're fairly, most of their economy is fairly open, and so there's definitely a lot of transactions going on. So the gap between that really negative result and that really positive result really makes it, that's kind of what the negative base result is describing. So 12-month moving average moved up a little bit, moved towards the positive area, but still negative for the 12 months. If we go on to watches by material, across the board it was fairly, I would say, like unchanged. If you look at units sold, you can see precious metals were positive, steel, gold, and other materials were negative 5-ish% on units. If you look at the the actual currency change, you can see that other metals went up by about 8%, steel went up by 8%, and then you have those two negatives for precious metals and gold, steel. This isn't really that bad, you know, when you look at this. But again, there's some hidden messages along there. So you can see volume-wise, definitely down, negative 23% when it comes to volume by material. But then when you look at the actual dollar or Swiss franc amount that was actually exported, you can see it's just slightly positive. Moving on to the price categories, this is again, I think, showing a similar story that we've kind of spoken about at length. You can see that, interestingly, sub 200 Swiss franc watches had negative results both in units and value, and then that 200 to 500 Swiss franc saw positive gains of 12 and 13% respectively in units and value, and I thought that was really interesting. I don't really know what would be causing this. It might have to do with that negative base effect again, but nothing really tells me like, okay, this specific watch was released, so these are the types of watches that people would end up buying. So probably has to do with that negative base effect. And then if you look from 500 Swiss francs up through past 3,000 Swiss francs, you can basically see that units and value were right around that 0% mark, so kind of unchanged year over year. As a kind of summing all of the price categories, again, it's the same results by material. You can see units fell by 23%, but you can see that positive 0.2% there. Moving on to the most important part, which I think is what we want to talk about now, and that is the main markets. So I'll put up the top 6 markets right now. You can see the top 6 markets. Interestingly enough, the US was number 1, US, China, Hong Kong, Japan, United Kingdom, and Singapore. Once again, we see 4 Asian countries dominating the top 6 markets, which make up about 54% of the total market share for the last month's watch exports. US coming in at an increase of 8.8%. This is an interesting result, and I think it shows the rebound in these markets, because the US, I don't think there was too much of an effect. I think March was really when economically COVID had an impact on it, but by growing at a 9% clip year over year is a fairly good result for us, and I think it shows the robustness of the watch market in the US at the current time right now. But the big one is the number 2 place, which came in lower than what the US exports were for the last month, and that is China. A positive 161% result. Still less than the US, but that's just insane to grow that much. Again, this is directly showing you that negative base effect of their watch exports shrunk hugely to a really small number in 2020, and now in 2021 it's a lot bigger. So that kind of like explains why they're up by 161%. And again, moving kind of down the list, you can see fairly kind of decent results kind of across the board. We did see some shrinking in Japan and the United Kingdom, but that was kind of not doesn't really stand out too much. I think another place that had fairly good results when you compare 2020 to 2021 is Russia, with plus 66%. They're coming in at 14th. And so like across the board, it was kind of even, but I think again, this is really showing you that negative base effect. These are places that are really getting rocked. So I think when you kind of look at the total markets, you can really see the difference. So in 2020, the US had exports of 205 million Swiss francs. This next year, you can see 2020, you can see that the results were 224 million Swiss francs. So there was a growth rate, a 9% growth rate between them. That really is that. What you should look at though is the China results. You can see 151 million Swiss francs in 2019, 73 million in 2020, and then a nice rebound to 191 million in 2021. And so that really shows you the high, low, and then again to a high, and that's why there was such a massive difference there. While China did make up a good portion of one of the markets that did export, or I guess import Swiss watches, I will say that US result is fairly gives you a little bit of confidence in the market itself. 2020 was a decent year for watches in my opinion. It wasn't outstanding, but it was just a regular kind of year. And the fact that we've grown by that much in 1 year, that's fairly good. Now, as we go into March and April and May, what we're going to have is the negative base effect on the U.S. results. So it's again going to be skewed. So it's going to be important that we look at the actual the Swiss franc value to kind of compare and contrast these nations. The last thing I wanted to do, and I do it every time, is just look at the exports by region. Again, Asia making up 52% of total share. I mean, that's insane. Imagine if one day Asia said, you know what, we don't want to buy any more watches. That's huge. That's a massive market that the Swiss watches are going to end up. The Swiss watch industry is going to end up losing. The likelihood of that happening, it's not like it's going to be cut off straight away. It's probably going to be just a slow decline. But from what I'm seeing so far, the Asian market is loving watches, loving what's coming out of Switzerland, and so they're probably continue to buy. And then Europe making up 28%, America 18%, the Americas 18%, Oceania 1%, Africa 1%. And if you look at that variation, you could see Asia as positive, mostly driven by that negative base effect of China. America up by 4.4%, which again, that's showing a lot of robustness in the US market, I think, and then in everything else kind of negative from there. I think European economies, African economies, I think they're having a harder time recovering from COVID-19, and so I think they're recovering at a slower rate, economically speaking. But hopefully, as the vaccines kind of work their way through the system, that they'll be able to open up very, very soon. So moving on to March, I think this is another month where negative base effect is really going to have an impact. COVID-19 really came over to the United States around this time last year, and it affected economies in Europe as well. And so you would expect that just in a recovery from a recovery perspective, most nations would have recovered by this time next year. So you're probably going to see positive results coming out of Swiss watch exports for next month. Thinking about how much that's going to be, I'm going to probably guess about maybe positive 6%. That might be a little bit high, but I think positive 6% is probably what we're going to be looking at. Could be as high as positive 10% if I think about the negative base effect from China and kind of use that as well. I think March was a fairly decent month, especially with the rollout of some of these vaccinations. Economies are opening up more aggressively because people are vaccinated. They don't have to follow, they have to follow the regulations, but I think there's a little bit more that companies can do now to get back up and running. So I'm gonna guess negative 6%. It's probably gonna be, it can go up maybe as high as positive 10% for the month of March. I hope you guys enjoyed going over the Swiss watch exports for the month of February. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think the results for February, and also what your prediction is for the month of March. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Also, if you did not do in the beginning of the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us for the YouTube algorithm. And with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.